Thank you, David. And conference, you've heard David talking about the importance of supporting the most vulnerable families. And I think that point was powerfully underlined by the video you've just seen. But as life as a parent becomes ever more complex for all of us, we've really got to make sure that the support that's there evolves to meet those challenges. And I'd like you to welcome somebody who's going to join us today, Harry Benson, who is going to tell us about the work that he does at the Bristol Community Family Trust. Harry.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Harry, you've fought in the Falklands War, worked in business and finance, and established the Bristol Community Family Trust. And you've come along to tell us a little bit more about that today and the work that you're doing. And I'd be particularly interested in, when it comes to strengthening families and reducing family breakdown, what's your experience in the work that you've done in Bristol?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Maria, for inviting me. It's a huge honour to be here. I guess all of us here realise how important family is. It has huge consequences across society for us as individuals and families. And most families are doing pretty well, but there's a growing minority of families who struggle and find it all really rather difficult. And over the last 50 years or so, we've seen a relentless rise in family breakdown with no real sign of that stopping. And if we're going to have a family policy that's going to make a difference and stop this relentless rise of family breakdown, it needs to be rooted in evidence and not in ideology. We've had far too much ideology and not enough evidence. And I'm here to tell you that there is some fantastic evidence, very solid evidence, that we can make a difference. We can stem this tide of family breakdown. We can reduce family breakdown, and we can strengthen families. And one of the first things I think is probably the most important thing to get hold of is the source of family breakdown. The prime source has, over the last 30 years, has not been the rise of divorce, because divorce rates have barely changed in those 30 years, amazingly enough. It's been the trend away from marriage that has been the prime source of family breakdown, and the collapse of more and more unmarried families with young kids. I did a study with a colleague at Birmingham University, and we did the biggest study there's been in this country of family breakdown. And we looked at 15,000 mums who had babies in the year 2000, 2001. And what we found was that by the children's 5th birthday, something like 9% of the married parents had split up. 9%. That's not particularly great, is it? But 35% of the unmarried parents had split up, all before the child's 5th birthday. And most parents have absolutely no intention of going down this route. They want to make their relationships work. Some of it is down to background, undoubtedly. It matters. Age, income, education, ethnic group all have different rates of breakdown. But we found that when we analysed this further, that we found that the single biggest factor in whether these families stay together or not in those early years of parenthood was whether they were married or not. So I utterly applaud, as someone from the voluntary sector who has an interest in policy, I utterly applaud David Cameron's unequivocal approach that supports marriage and commitment. And that's the kind of approach that is going to make a difference if we're going to turn this tide of family breakdown.
So, Harry, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with families, particularly young families in Bristol, and the sort of effect it has?
My day job is to run courses on relationships for couples, for parents. We do it for engaged couples who are going to get married. We run it in prison for prison families, which is a wonderful experience. And we also run courses for new parents. And that's probably where we have been most successful. And I hope this is the kind of idea that you might pick up on and think this is something we could do on a wider scale. In Bristol, we run roughly 100-odd courses a year through post-natal clinics for new parents. And we're running a short version of our relationship course for 1 in 3 of all new mothers in Bristol. So over the last 12 months, that's getting on for 900 first-time mums, which is pretty substantial, I think. And nobody else has done anything like this. And this is the kind of program which could easily be rolled out across the country if that was the sort of thing you thought you'd be interested in. And the proof of the pudding of whether this makes a difference is in 2 parts. The first part is that our courses are based on the factors that predict success and failure in relationships. And so we're based on good empirical evidence. And also, these programs have been shown to strengthen families and reduce family breakdown amongst engaged couples, for example. Some of the better programs have been shown to knock 50% off divorce rates, which is pretty substantial. Engaged couples generally quite like each other and generally do pretty well, but we can improve their odds. So on our short courses in Bristol are a short version of this. And the proof of the pudding is that 95% of married mums, 95% of unmarried mums, and 95% of lone parents think our courses are useful. So they don't find them judgmental, they find them very practical and helpful. And that's the sort of thing that I think we could be doing if you want an evidence-based family policy.
I mean, Harry, obviously what you're doing is clearly very successful. What do you think the difference is between what you do and what other organisations do? What's the winning formula?
Well, apart from drive and panache and all those sorts of things, and learning how to run on a shoestring like most voluntary sector organisations, the key thing we do is we're in the business of prevention. We're in the business of preventing family breakdown. This isn't family therapy or counselling. This is about getting people at an early stage of relationship. And perhaps the best way to get to grips with the sorts of things that we do is if I were able to tell you a little bit about how it works. One of the key things that influences relationships in the early stages is our bad habits, the ways that we tend to behave badly towards one another. So I've now got you all on the edge of your seats, and I hope that I'll give you a few ideas anyway, and you see what you think. I use an idea called STOP, S-T-O-P, and it stands for scoring points, thinking the worst, opting out, and putting down. Scoring points, thinking the worst, opting out, putting down. So if you can think of the ways in which these are the sorts of behaviours that you occasionally do, I'm sure you're all completely perfect, but just every now and then you might do one of these things. Scoring points, just as one example, and actually sitting in amongst a row of politicians, my mind is wandering already. But anyways, you know, I'm not going to go there. Scoring points is when someone says to you, you did this, and they just want you to acknowledge something, but you feel under pressure, you feel accused. So you fire back by saying, well, what about you? You didn't do that, or you're not so blooming perfect. And you can see how that kind of thing can escalate, and a lot of us do that. But if you nip it in the bud, you can stop a shocker of an argument from developing. Now, I hope you can see from just that little example how easy it is to teach this idea, how easy it is to relate to this idea, and why people find this thing so fruitful. If you go away, for example, and you apply one of those ideas at home in your own lives, of score points less in the next week, or think the worst less in the next week, or opt out less in the next week, put down next. And I'm thinking of a late night BBC programme here, actually, springs to mind when I think of put downs. Then maybe you'll see your relationship change just through some little tweaks. And that's what relationship education is all about. It's not rocket science.
Harry, thank you so much for coming along today and for taking the time to tell us a little bit more about the work that you do. And I'm sure that everybody in the conference today would like to join me in thanking you for taking the time to be here and to talk to us about your experiences.
Thanks so much, Maria. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very good, very good. Now, thank you so much for that. That was fascinating. If we apply all those techniques, politicians will be out of business. Now, we're going to have our question and answer session now. We've got, can I just mention the first two people who I hope will be coming to make their comments and questions are Andrea Leadsom, who's the PPC in South Northamptonshire, and after her